So, Kerrace, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned Gaia's correction. I'm trying to understand a little bit about Gaia's correction. There's lots of events happening in the world right now, not just on a worldly level, but on a planetary level. And I'm hearing things like more solar flares are happening in the world, or outside the world, as far as the sun is concerned. Can you discuss a little bit about that?
Sure. So we're in this cycle of the of solar flare activity, which is intensifying.
I guess that's one proof that we're in a different cycle than previously, because we haven't had this many solar flares before. Is that correct?
Right. So we're in the second half of a 22-year cycle, and each cycle is broken into 11 years. And so this part of the 22-year cycle, this 11-year cycle that we're in the midst of right now, is where we're going to see an increase in solar flares. Now, mainstream media is saying that we're potentially going to be having less solar activity, but I beg to differ. And it'll be demonstrated by the amount of activity that we see on our Earth plane, and that means that when we have a lot of solar activity, that our sun, when we have coronal mass ejections from our sun, the coronal mass ejections that come from our sun happen as a result of planetary alignments. And so when these planetary alignments happen, there's a tightness. And usually what happens is that either 3 or more planets are in tight proximity. And so when 3 or more planets are in tight proximity, the energy is a buildup in energy. That energy hits the sun. And when it hits the sun, then there are what are called coronal mass ejections. These coronal mass ejections come off the sun, and if they're facing our Earth, they're not all facing our Earth, they will hit the magnetic field of the Earth. And when they hit the magnetic fields of the Earth, they cause the tectonic plates of the Earth to shift. What does that cause? Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions. It causes earth changes. So these solar flares, or these coronal mass ejections, are causing earth changes. So if you look from now until the end of this year, we have 7 major planetary alignments that are coming up. That in itself tells you that there's going to be some intensification of energy coming onto this planet. When these coronal mass ejections come off the sun and they hit the magnetic fields of the Earth, and they cause the tectonic plates to shift and creating massive Earth changes, they also affect humans. And we have a magnetic field around us, as we talked about earlier. And so the magnetic field around us changes as well, which causes a lot of emotional imbalances. So if you're feeling like you have anxiety, you can't sleep at nights, having hot flashes, having aches and pains in the body, feeling disoriented, erratic behavior, emotions flaring up, that's because when the magnetic fields of this energy is hitting the magnetic fields of the Earth, it hits our magnetic fields personally, and it causes us to have this reaction to the energy that's coming onto the Earth. So don't think that just because the Earth is changing or having its changes through the magnetic fields that we're not changing. We are changing as well. These magnetic coronal mass ejections affect the consciousness of humanity as well. That's not talked about, but it needs to be talked about more and more.
When you mentioned the planet alignments, and I'm just going to say this even though it's kind of strange, but the image that came into my mind was the Star of Bethlehem and the 3 wise men. I don't know why. But when I think of that, what comes to mind is, planets aligning, 3 wise men, star in the sky. I think about astrology. So can you tell me what's happening in the world, or what's happening with the planets, how that conjuncts with astrology?
well, there's the Star of Bethlehem and the three wise men. That is actually probably a star system. It's just that, for humans, we explain it, on our Earth as a story, right? But really, it has astronomical ramifications as opposed to a real story that's happening on this Earth. So from an astrological standpoint, Gaia, let's look at Gaia. From Gaia's correction standpoint, she's tacking her way through our solar system, through the astrological signs. There's 13 astrological signs. And she's basically tacking her way through the astrological signs as she makes her correction. And so from an astrological standpoint, that's where we can learn her story and be a part of her story. If we understand from an astrological standpoint what the different signs mean and what each of the signs represent, we can, and as Gaia goes through the different signs, we can participate actively in her correction, in her story, as she tacks through the different signs over the next 3 years.
Interesting, because I often hear we're moving from Pisces to Aquarius.
Exactly.
I'm Aquarius, so I often wonder what does that mean on a larger scheme when you're moving from Pisces to Aquarius. And then you also mentioned there's 2 periods of 22, or 2 periods of 11 that equals 22 years, which reminds me of the 11:11, and it reminds me of Mayan prophecy and all that. So it almost sounds like all that is tying into.
Everything's very interconnected. We don't, very interconnected. But you being an Aquarius, we understand why you're actually doing these type of interviews, because it's just your Aquarian nature. We are moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. When that happens, that's debatable. So that has to deal with consciousness. That has to deal with, so you as an Aquarius type of person, you're very interested in understanding how consciousness works and understanding the transformation and shift that we as a human species are going into. And being an Aquarius, you are going to be very integral in getting the word out about this transformation and shift that we are in the midst of, which is why you're doing these videos and putting these sessions together, these workshops together. It's very much a part of how you're wired and why you're doing this. You're living your life purpose. You're moving into alignment.
Well, hey, that feels good. I have to really thank you for joining us tonight. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm really hoping everyone comes to Kerrace's workshop, Journey into the Heart. We're going to have it in August. We'll let you know when it is. And thank you, Kerrace, for being with us.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.